Zarya is low-key one of the most slept-on tanks at the moment, but why? Zarya has, historically, one of the lowest win rates in Overwatch 2 history, yet, recently in Face It, she's the most banned tank in the West. So what the hell is happening? We'll be taking a look at this Face It Masters game on screen, mainly because literally every other game I checked was more boring than a J. Cole album. For the bans, TA banned Queen, while Arius, the Zarya team, banned Tracer. Keep these bans in mind for later. The purpose of the Zarya is to play for a slow, prolonged fight to get the Zarya to high charge. Zarya can only hold space when she's high charge and when she's got at least one bubble in reserve. If you've got a keen eye, you'll also notice the Ramatra. People think Ram is a counter to Zarya, but as long as you can live his form cycle, Zarya should actually have the upper hand. For the first fight, Lars is just looking to get charged, while Tama and the rest of TA are looking for a close early fight. The reason for this is because you don't want to give the Sojourn, Kiri or Lucio any distance to be able to absorb your engage, and you also don't want to give the Zarya time to get high charge. As a result, it's not a surprise to see Sukuna pop the Hyper Ring, Tama popping the form, and Volts getting popped by the Pharah and Ram. It also doesn't help that Jesper goes too deep and gets burned by the entire enemy backline. The silver lining though is that Lars is able to live, keeping his energy. With a spare bubble and some good charge, he walks forward, making sure to keep some distance away from the Ramatra. Now, his Kiriko does tank a railgun, which prompts Tama to pop his form, but because Kiri is Kiri, she's completely fine. We also haven't talked about Venture that much. Their role is just to be an attention draw. In other words, during the Hyper Ring Nemesis cycle, the Venture will threaten the backline, drawing attention away from the frontline. We see this here with the Pharah Lucio literally looking in the opposite direction to the Ramatra. I will say Jesper does get too greedy for the kill, but you can see the attention split is absolutely textbook. Keep watching because there'll be more juicy stuff on Venture throughout. Despite Jesper dying, Lars takes a great angle in the mid-fight, catching Lauren on the Sojourn. Of course, having your Kiriko hit 2 back-to-back kunais does help, but this flank should help explain Zarya's power. How many of you would have also just moved back main instead of taking the angle to the right? It's small, but game-changing. Now a man down, Tama pops his form trying to look for something, but there's just no threat. Lars easily lives it, and now on full charge, with a Kitsune rush as well, the fight is basically over. Takuno gets cooked, Alba gets cooked, and even after he cooks Tama, the Pharah is the cherry on top. As we move to second, we do start seeing some of Zarya's pitfalls, but I'll save those for later. For the time being, both support ults are used by Arius to push through the choke, and because Lauren is alone on high ground, he drops. Jesper on the Pharah comes from downtown, getting a bubble by Lars for energy. This baits Peekaboo into chasing Jesper, who's actually very safe in reality. And because of how both the DPS are mispositioned, this allows Lars to catch them in a fat grab, with Alba just being a tad too late to save his Pharah. Now you're also seeing the importance of saving bubbles in the mid-fight. Even though Lars is around 60 charge, the spare bubble allows him to just barely escape the safety and live. Generally, it's better to be on 60 charge with 1 bubble than to be on 100 charge with 0 bubbles. You're just too squishy and can't play as aggressively as you'd like if you haven't got a bubble. This idea comes up again as Lars pushes the enemy team on good charge with a bubble. It's that spare bubble that allows Lars to push forward and just about land the finishing blow onto the Sojourn. Coming to the end of second, you'd expect Arius to lose his fight. Annihilation and Orbital Ray for just the overclock? Well, I think the way Arius played this fight is honestly world class. The key concept here is baiting. In other words, teasing the enemy team to engage by applying frontline pressure, then being able to safely live during that engage by playing distance. Here, look at how far everyone on Arius is playing. Every single player is in a position that makes them safe if they get pushed because of the distance, but they can also still apply good frontline pressure. Not to mention the triple angle setup from the Pharah, the Sojourn and the Zarya. Volts is also playing in a perfect position to speed back Lars if he gets pushed. The sheer amount of pressure that Arius outputs gets Peekaboo low. This gives a trigger for Sleek to overclock and push the advantage slowly, and from there on, it's officially Jova. Takuno tries to pop the Ray to swing back the fight, but he ends up dying. And, like I said at the beginning, if you can get your Zarya to live in the mid-fights on high charge, you've basically won. Now, if you're wondering how you beat this Zarya setup, I talk about that on my Metafy page. Check that out for more detailed analysis that just don't make the final cuts of my videos. One thing that I haven't mentioned that Zarya can do is that she's pretty decent at zoning. We saw Venture being played earlier to the same effect, and in this case, Lars is able to zone the Sojourn just by beaming. This means that when Tama goes in, the Sojourn is out, and even his annihilation isn't enough to run over the Zarya. Lars is eventually able to mow down Tama, who is still trying to look for value in his annihilation. Now, coming to the last fight, Lars is basically playing a sandbox, doing whatever the fuck he wants. He's got high charge, a bubble and a grav, giving Arius a nice time bank with their cap. Just to put things into perspective for that attack, Lars was alive for 3 straight minutes, from 3 minutes 51 to 6 minutes 51. That might sound crazy, but on defense, Lars was alive from 11 minutes and 15 seconds to 16 minutes and 2 seconds. That's basically 5 minutes, or equivalent to 2.09 deaths per 10. So, let's see what he does in those 5 minutes. First, I want to highlight the bubbles. Here, the first bubble is used to bubble aggression from the Pharah and Ramatra. Bubbling aggression sounds easy, but you need to be looking at what the enemy team are looking at. If someone, especially a hit scan hero, isn't looking at you, don't bubble. Anyways, this second bubble is onto Jesper, gaining Lars a ton of energy. Here's where we get into the turn and burn, which I've mentioned many times before. If you don't know, it's where one player zones 3 or 4 players, usually the backline, while the rest of your team turn and burn the remaining player on the front line. In this case, Venture is doing the zoning with every single player looking at Jesper. This allows Lars and the rest of his team to turn and burn the Ramatra left on the front line. Honestly, if Tama wasn't as greedy as he was, he still probably gets out of this alive. We haven't mentioned the perks yet, but Lars actually chose the piercing perk over the bubble perk, and we start to see why. During Alba's rally, his shield breaks and he's forced to move away. Without that piercing perk, Tama could just body block for his brig and save the day. But obviously, with that perk, that just can't happen. Paired with a bit of Kitsune speed, and Lars eventually shreds the whole backline too. This isn't the only example though. Here, the cast needs to retreat back, and Lauren tries to hide behind his Ramatra. However, that piercing perk allows Lars to still reach Lauren and land the kill. The piercing perk is honestly super underrated because it's hard to tell whether it's actually making an impact, but clearly it is. Now, I wish I could say that Zarya is flat out broken, but there are some key flaws. Most obviously, there were occasions where Lars would just get blown up if the enemy Pharah had barrage. It really shows just how squishy Zarya is, and had Lars been on literally any other tank, he lives. Secondly, Zarya has very little horizontal mobility. You look at pretty much every tank in the game, even Hog with his movement breather perk, and it's sad to see that Zarya pretty much has nothing. This is why we see Vultza stay pretty close to the Zarya all the time, because she needs to be able to be sped out if she gets rushed on. But that comes at a cost, which is how much support the DPS gets. In this fight, pay attention to how both DPS are playing completely split from their backline. It just takes a few good shots and a good railgun by Lauren to zone out the Pharah. Understandably, Vultza wall rides over to try and help him. But this now means Lars has no speed, so it's super easy for the enemy team to just run him over with Orbital Ray, Hypering and Ram Punches. So how do you fix this? Well, remember that Tracer ban at the start? Arius could play something like Juno Kiriko because of it. Kiriko could support the DPS on the high ground, while the Juno can heal and speed the Zarya. Tracer is often a very good counter to Juno Kiriko or Juno Ana backlines because of how squishy they can be, but with that ban, that's no longer an issue. Vultza, however, is much more comfortable on Lucio, so it is what it is. Anyways, check out this video on screen if you enjoyed this one, and check out my Sparlow approved coaching if you want to climb. Until next time.